Today, I want to show you this social distance collab project I did that I think you should do too, and also some of the stuff that's up for download at gmhaudio.com that's free that you can get that you might not have known about. Alrighty, here we are in my Pro Tools session for this social distance collab thing. I got this idea from a friend of mine, Chris Senador, who's a great musician, an engineer, and songwriter, and he posted this thing on Facebook. That was like, here's an acoustic guitar part, add another part to it, and we'll throw it all together and see what happens. I ended up laying down bass. Some of our other friends played drums, other guitar parts, some keys. Someone even laid down vocals. I thought it was really cool, and it turned out into a pretty awesome song. So a little while later, I was like, I want to do this again. I'll host one of these. I recorded an electric guitar part, and some people added drums, bass, some more guitar, and I'll show you what we came up with. And I want to also take this opportunity to show you some stuff that I have on my website that's up for free download. I have impulse responses, drum sample, plugins, show you what I got up there and how I would use them. So here's the track. I'm going to play the instrumental version. There are some vocals, but the vocals are from a well-known pop song, and I am not going to play them because I don't want to get copyright striked, but there is going to be a link in the description where you can download the finished version with the vocals so you could hear that. So I started with just this rhythm guitar part that I recorded. And I posted that up. I posted up the chords, the tempo, said, do some stuff. I think the next thing that happened was I got some bass from my friend Will, who's right here. I also got another bass track from Dustin. And then we got drums from Matt. And we got some lead guitar from Chris. And we threw it all together and ended up with a pretty cool song. So here's what all that sounds like. If you want to hear the full thing, there's going to be a link in the description where you could download an MP3 of this with the vocals to the well-known pop song that I took out for YouTube. And I think that really takes it to the next level. It matches up really well. I think this was a really fun thing. I might do another one of these in the near future. And I think that anyone that's watching this, if you play any sort of instrument, have any sort of recording setup at all, it does not have to be fancy. It's just kind of a for fun thing. Get people making music instead of just sitting around on YouTube all day while we're all social distancing and quarantining and all that. It's a lot of fun. So record a simple part, post it up, have some other people add some layers to it, throw it together, see what you get. Anyway, let me talk about some of this stuff I used on here that you can get on my website for free right now. First, I'm going to talk drum samples. So here's the kick drum that was recorded by Matt. Pretty good thunky kick drum. I wanted a little bit of extra snap. So I have this sample right here. I called it aggro kick. It's a really clicky kind of typewritery kick drum. It's good for like punk metal stuff. And I just wanted some click from that to blend in with this kick drum, which I thought had a really solid low end, but I wanted a little more snap. So I actually took an EQ and I rolled off all the low end from the sample. So I'm only left now with this typewritery clicky sound. This dip right here is just mellowing out a little bit because it was a little too clicky. And then I blend that back in with the original kick drum. And without it. So pretty subtle, but gives it just a little more something. And that aggro kick is up for free download on my website if you want it. Also on the snare drum. So here's the original snare drum. It's just a top mic. It's kind of dry sounding. And there weren't any room mics recorded with this. So I wanted a little bit more space on the snare. But instead of using a reverb like you might traditionally do, I used a room sample that I made in my garage, which is called Garage Snare. It sounds like this. This is a snare drum in the middle of my garage, and mic's on the other side of it, just hitting big rim shots. Big, roomy, full sound, a lot of snare wire sizzle. And I mixed that in with this dry snare drum. You got a big reverby snare just from blending this in, where otherwise I might use the snare more in like a room mic, but I didn't have it, or I might use a snare bottom to get some of that sizzle and some reverb. But this is a great way to add a little bit of room and life to a dry snare drum. That's one of my favorite samples. I use that all the time. There's the drums. Actually, we got some more drums. I told you there weren't room mics. So what are these tracks or rooms right here? Well, these are fake rooms I made out of the overheads. And I used this space plugin with a room reverb impulse response that I made that's also available on my website. So this is just a duplicate of the overhead track. It's got a little bit of EQ and processing on it, but here's what it sounds like without the impulse response. And here's with it. So you get a lot more space. It sounds a lot more like a room mic. I like to take out the early reflections when I do this kind of trick, because I feel like those can kind of get weird and phasey with the actual mics. And I don't need that as much because it's just a duplicate over the overheads. The early stuff's already in there. So I just get like the roomy space from this, and it's a way to make kind of a fake room mic track if I don't have one that was tracked. And then from there, I treat it like I would a normal room mic with compression and EQ. I also did a duplicate of this where I used this garage impulse. And I think I used the cardioid one, yeah. And I did kind of the same thing for just another flavor to blend in there too. And I did make a video about how I made these garage impulse responses. So the two of those together makes a pretty convincing room track out of just the overheads, and blend those back into the drums. And between that garage snare sample and these fake rooms with these impulse responses I made, I've got a big roomy drum sound from otherwise really dry sounding close mic drums. Cool. Another thing impulses are great for are guitar cabs. I used this Neural DSP Nolly archetype amp sim for my rhythm guitars. I really like this. This is kind of a model of a Marshall. I've got an actual Marshall kind of next to me. I've tried them against each other. This is a little different, but it definitely captures the spirit and the vibe, and it's 100% usable. And for something quick like this, where I just want to be able to get a cool tone fast, it's perfect. But what I do like to do when I do this is I like to use my own cab impulse responses that I made. So up on my website, I have some cab impulse responses of my Orange 212 and my Marshall 412 cab. So here I'm using the 1960, that's a Marshall 1960 412 with an SM7 microphone. It's actually an SM7B. And that sounds like this. And just for contrast, here's the stock cab in the AmSim with 57. And my impulse. Sounds pretty similar, but they're kind of similar mics on the same kind of cab, but this one's mine. It's got my own flavor. And instead of using kind of stock sound from an AmSim, I get to put my own spin on it with custom impulse responses. I also have a couple other ones up in here. I really like this PPC 212. That's my orange cab with the 57. It's got a lot thicker low mid-range. And this is maybe my favorite one, the 212 with an Audix D4 mic. But for now, let's stick with this Marshall 412. So those cab impulse responses, go download them, check them out. I also have some audio plugins that I coded. So let me show you how I'm using those. The first one I have is this one here. It's called Stereo Tool. And this is just a basic palette of different kind of stereo operations. It's kind of more of a utility thing. And I'm using this as a widening tool right here. So I've got it on my mix bus before my mix compressor. Just a quick note, I'm using Pro Tools and I'm using this plugin, but this plugin is not available as AAX. It's only available as VST and AU. In order to use this, I'm using this plugin called Meta Plugin, which allows you to wrap VSTs and AUs and load it up as an AAX in Pro Tools. If you're not using Pro Tools, you don't need to worry about that. But just a note if you're wondering how I'm opening up this particular plugin in Pro Tools. Anyway, I'll bypass this. I could actually do it right on the plugin. And I'm just using it for some subtle widening on the mix bus. It's super subtle. I'll show you a more extreme example. I just want a little bit of extra width. Essentially, that's a mid-side balance tool. All the way in this one's all mid, which is all mono information. This side is all the stereo information. So this will be like the guitars and reverbs and stuff like that. And this will be like drums, center pan vocals, stuff like that. So just pushing it a little bit towards the side gives a little bit of extra width on those stereo things. You could also flip the left and right balance, just sum everything to mono, change the balance if maybe your left channel is coming in a little hot compared to your right channel, pan stuff around if you want to mess with that. But for now, I'm just using it for a little bit of extra width on the sides. I've also got this guy, which is called Buzz Cut. This is a clipping plugin. I'm using this on the drums right now. What clipping's cool for is evening out the dynamics on transient information like drums, and you can kind of level them off without affecting the sound of the punch in a way that you can't really do with compression and limiting. So let me show you what this is doing. Anything in this red on the waveform is getting clipped off. So it's just taking off the very top loudest peaks. And if I bypass it, I'll show you that it doesn't really change the sound very much. This is all my whole drum bus. And after this, I'm going into this compressor. So let me show you why this is cool. If I turn this off and look at the gain reduction on this compressor, it's a little bit inconsistent. Some things are hitting up at like 5 or 6, some are down more at like 4. But if I clip off the highest peaks, I'm not really changing the sound of the drums, but I am changing how hard the like actual volume is going into this compressor because I'm clipping off the loudest bits. Now you can see we're hitting a very consistent 4 dB of compression every single time with every single hit. This lets you really dial in the compression. It lets you actually make things sound louder without actually being technically louder, which is really good if you're looking for like extra volume for a loud modern sound. And both those plugins are also available for download on my website, VST and AU. That's all I got for you today. Go give these things a download, play with them in your own sessions, and make your own social distance collab track with your friends.